Q's a loser who prefers to play games than talk to women. But when he falls for the most popular Russian transfer student, loser Rizzed, everything changes and they start getting crazier every day. Unlike your average bad guy, Aliyah is hotter than Xenia and turns heads the moment she steps onto campus. While everyone wishes she was his bathwater, an overconfident Dejahan's spell keeps her from working. To everyone's surprise, she immediately rejects him. So in a desperate attempt to save face, she asks for his number. This time, Aliyah explains that she would never find a smitten loser like him attractive and walks away. Emotional damage. No one can believe she rejected the hottest guy in school. A few minutes later, she walks into the classroom and sees Q snoring, so she kicks his chair and asks if he's been spending the night at the mall. After she tells him that Anigun had another blow last night, he calls her a brat, but she defends her otaku lifestyle, claiming that she would sacrifice everything for the cause. When she suddenly starts yawning, the woman looks at him intently and says something in Russian so that he won't understand. When the teacher enters the first class, Q pulls her desk over to Aliyah to share her textbook, but hits the snooze button as soon as the lecture begins. Aliyah senses this and hits her with her pen, accidentally raising her hand. Then the teacher asks her a question, so Aliyah shows the wrong answer and belittles her. While scolding her for putting it that way, he uses the Russian phrase from before, and when she asks him what it means, he claims that it means she's stupid. However, Q turns red in both her face and magnums because he didn't tell her that he understood Russian, and she's been calling him really cute all this time. Finally, when class is over, he tries to play a game, but Aliyah takes his phone and sees that he's interested in the silver-haired moon goddess. So he hands it back and calls her a cheater in Russian for never paying attention to her this much. Again, she acts like she doesn't understand what he's saying because she'd die of embarrassment if she admitted it. Hours later, he joins his friends Tishi and Hikaru for lunch in the cafeteria. After Tishi complains about being a depressed loner who can't get a girl, the hottest chicks from the student council come in. They immediately see Aliyah, the treasurer, followed by Masha, the secretary, and Yuki, the press secretary. Tishi then calls Q lucky because he's the only guy Aliyah has ever talked to, but Q claims it's just because they're sitting together. Then he tries to look at the girls and locks eyes with Yuki, who immediately approaches Aliyah and asks her to join them. After they agree, Yuki sits next to Q and starts talking to him as if they've been friends forever. This makes Ali jealous. So he asks how they know each other, and Yuki explains that they've been friends for years and go to the same schools. The next moment, Tichai tells Q that she can't stand being around bad guys and breaks up with Hikaru. Yuki then moves her seat closer to Q to ask if he'll join the student council so they can relive the glory days of their last school, where he was president and she was vice president, after he tells Aliyah how trustworthy he really is. Aliyah says that he always knew not to compliment her directly in Russian. After Yuki leaves, he leaves her with Aliyah, who says that she never expected an antisocial loser like her to have friends. When he suddenly points at her and tells her that he's her friend, she's shocked and says that she has to do something before she leaves to hide her excitement. In a dream that night, Hughes remembers a Russian friend from his past and spends most of his time learning her language. After waking up and wondering why he can't remember her name, he goes to school and cleans up the entire classroom before Aliyah walks in. She immediately asks if it was some kind of miracle because she's never been here before, but ignores it to ask why her socks are stained. After explaining how a truck splashed muddy water on her, he starts taking off her socks and sees her immediate reaction to her perfect feet. This gives him a bad idea and tells him to get new socks from his closet. After he reluctantly takes them off, she tells him to put them on for her. Naturally, he gets mad and asks if she's serious, so he tells her to stop acting like he hasn't thought about it. Then he switches to Russian and admits that he wants that too, and this makes her wonder if he's secretly a weirdo. But when she calls him a coward for hesitating, he tries to stop her, and she grabs his leg and slowly puts on his new socks. After reminding him that she wants it, he accidentally touches her nether region, and kicks her in the noggin viciously before running away. He then spends most of the day avoiding her until he finally catches up to her and apologizes. Surprisingly, she doesn't get upset anymore and even tries to check his neck, but she gets angry and backs off before thanking him for looking at her pussy. Hearing this, Aliyah is embarrassed again and punches him before running away. He chases her all over the school until she finally gets tired enough to hear him. This time, he apologizes with his favorite soda, and after accepting it, he takes a sip and asks her in Russian if she wants some. The sudden kiss proposal catches her off guard, but she quickly acts like she doesn't understand, causing Aliyah to smile, thinking she still doesn't understand what he's saying. The next day, Q finds Yuki in the storage room and asks why he called her, but she teases him for being late and asks him to help her sort through all the boxes. A few minutes later, Yuki needs help getting to some board games, so Q brings them down for her and asks why he's so interested in them. He then explains to them how good he is. But Alia gets fed up and tells them to stop talking so they can actually do some work. Much later, they return to the council office and the girls thank them for all their help. The council president, Kaki, has also come to praise her. As she is about to leave, Kenzaki stops her and insists on making her lunch as a reward. She tries to politely decline the offer, but Kaki convinces the girls to join her, leaving her no choice but to accept. Hours later, they get a table at a local restaurant, and Kaki is once again recycling bottles before suddenly asking Q's to join the council. After he refuses and says he's had his fair share of council life at his previous school, Kaki reminds him that being on the council greatly increases his chances of getting an amazing recommendation. Despite this, Q still refuses and says he never does too much, so Yuki joins Kaki in begging him. Hughes then asks why he's so bothered if he's already the next president, but Kaki tells him to think again, as Alia is also running for the position next year. After eating their meal, Kaki orders Q's to take Alia home and sets off with Yuki. Alia then tells Q that she doesn't need his protection, but he ignores her and walks away with her, ignoring her. On the way, she asks if he's really serious about running for council president. After she says yes, he tells her to go home because it's close enough to walk the rest of the way. A few minutes later, Q returns home, and Yuki is already reading a book about the Alabama sisters with her feet up on the couch. He asks why she's acting like old friends at school after Hughes kicked her out for being such a shameless creep. So he says that's technically true since the siblings have been friends for a long time. As soon as he calls her weird for thinking that way, she stands up to defend her flawed brain before going back to her book and suddenly gets excited as the creepy siblings follow one another. The next morning, Hughes sees Yuki sitting on his brick and immediately tells her to get off, but she starts to sell him out and threatens to get in the sheets next time. Much later, they go to the mall to watch a movie, and after it's over, Yuki gets a little too emotional and tries to watch it again. So Q drags her away so they can go shopping. After a few minutes, she sits down and tries to pick out a new outfit, but then Q asks if she's seen some silver-haired girl spying on them. Yuki suggests that they approach the elephant in the store after she admits that she noticed them after they left the theater. So they both go to Alia and are surprised to see her. After being scared, Alia is surprised to see them too. So Yuki asks why she's at the mall. Alia then says that she's also shopping, and after talking about it a bit more, Yuki suggests they have lunch together. Q then explains that the place Yuki wants to try serves the hottest ramen on the planet. Despite this, Alia insists on coming, but when they get there, she starts to regret it when she sees that it's a hell-themed restaurant. After seeing the shocked expression on her face, Yuki asks if she's having second thoughts. So Alia goes inside and says that she's ready for anything. As soon as she gets inside, she doesn't know what to order. So Q suggests that she choose the most basic to save her taste buds from the torture. After ordering, Alia asks Yuki why she dresses like a boy. So Yuki says that she always wanted to try something different and finally got the chance after getting into bed with Q naturally. Alia is shocked and asks for more details. But while trying to explain their relationship to Alabama, the waiter serves them the food after staring at the instant death noodles for a few minutes. Alia musters up enough courage to take her first bite and immediately regrets going after them. However, when Q asks her if she's okay, she acts like nothing happened and even claims to love the food. So Yuki slips on the special spice that the restaurant has prepared for true spice lovers. Hughes immediately tries to stop her. Boo. After seeing the evil intent in her eyes, she realizes that she always wanted to traumatize Ali. Instead of admitting that she hates the food, Alia decides to taste the spice and almost gets herself admitted to the ER. After a few minutes, Hughes takes her out for a walk and after giving her ice cream, explains that Yuki ran off to get something and will probably be back later. He then asks her why she is running for council chair, and she says she always likes to push herself. He reminds her that she needs a running mate for vice president in order to be allowed into the race. After saying that she will eventually find someone, she subtly confesses in Russian that she wants him to be her. The next moment, he asks her to help him with the clothing store, but she is shocked by the sudden request and explains that she wants to do it for someone special. However, after remembering that she has no friends to go shopping with, he decides to be her best friend for the day, but she is shocked by the sudden kindness and thinks that he feels sorry for her, since she believes she will never win the election. To prove himself, he decides to drive her crazy with his fashion sense. But after a few minutes of dressing up, she panics and fears that he will respond in his usual emotional tone. After gathering some courage, she goes outside and gets the most unexpected response, as Q suddenly starts praising her beauty as if she were already married, and she immediately runs inside to hide her flushed face. Q also kneels down in embarrassment. Finally, Alia calms down and is convinced that she has experience with girls due to her all-night rehearsals with Yuki, so she starts wearing a few dresses to break her character. After a few dresses, she still hasn't broken her character, so she decides to wear something more risque to really surprise him. But as she opens the curtains to show off her melons, Yuki appears, causing the wannabe model to be traumatized by embarrassment. A few minutes later, they board the train together, and Alia remains traumatized the entire way until Yuki and Q reach their stop. Good night, and after they leave, her brain finally realizes that they got off at the same stop. After that, Alia returns home and is greeted by her sister Masha, who annoys her for a few minutes and realizes that something is really bothering her. When she asks about it, Alia tells her that she met Q's and his strange friend, and Masha is suddenly excited because Alia has never been so worried about a boy. She then tells Alia to admit that she likes him, but Alia denies it, saying that they are just friends. Masha then reminds Alia that she has always hated careless people like Q who never take anything seriously. 6 years ago, Alia's class was given a group project to research local businesses and write an essay that would be graded to see which group deserved the award. After choosing a group, they all discussed which businesses they would focus on. Alia, on the other hand, was very eager to get started, as she has always loved competitions. However, after visiting local businesses and starting to write essays, she realized that the group members had not yet started and told them to take the project seriously so that they could win. They then looked at her essay and told her to relax because the competition wasn't that big of a deal. Days later, she got frustrated with her work ethic and left the group to do everything on her own. Despite this, she still failed the competition. After spending the rest of the day in tears, she decided to never depend on anyone again. Years later, she passed the incredibly difficult transfer exam to return to Japan, and that's what made her famous. No one expected such a hottie to have a supercomputer brain. After greeting everyone, she went to class and saw that Q had already finished the first lesson. So, thinking it was a one-off, she woke him up. She recognized him easily because every boy in school was talking about him. And after greeting him, she realized that Hikaru was also in her class and continued to talk to him. Soon after, Alia saw him begging Hikaru for his textbook and began to realize that he looked like one of her old classmates. After watching him closely for a few days, he decided to treat him like any lazy geek. A few weeks later, the whole class started preparing for the festival, where they would have to turn the classroom into a hotbed for other students. After hours of work, everyone started going home, and when he offered to go for a walk with him, he declined and decided to continue working on the costumes. That evening, Hughes came over and told him to go home for a bit, but he refused as expected until he told him that, thanks to his good relationship with the former council president, the craft club had already offered to make the costumes. He had also gotten permission to stay the night at school so that everyone could finish the work together. NCE, there would be a lot of chicks around. The kids all agreed to show up on time. When he told him to go home again and told him that there was no point in working late alone, he got angry and said that he was just trying to make sure they put on an amazing show during the festival. Q then said that he should have focused on getting everyone involved, because that was the whole point of the festival. She still appreciated his efforts and apologized for rejecting them, but by then his ego had already been bruised, so he packed his things and went out. After spending the rest of the day cursing at her, she returned at night and was surprised to find the entire class actively working while he was in charge of everything. He soon joined them and had the best week of his life, working closely with everyone to make the festival presentation a success. On the day of the festival, they put on an amazing show, better than he could have imagined. After scaring the students for hours, they went out at night for a traditional bonfire dance. Alia saw Q sitting alone and decided to join him, but he was surprised that she was alone and said that everyone was trying to dance with her. After explaining how he rejected everyone to get some space, he called her the Ice Princess and said that the name came from everyone's brutal rejection of boys. Seeing that the name annoyed him, he asked if there was a specific reason. So he told her that being called a princess meant that everything she had achieved so far was just because of her good looks. In fact, she had always worked hard for everything she wanted. After promising never to call him an ice princess again, he apologized for losing his mind the other day and said that he had finally learned how important it was to work with others. He also promised to do anything she wanted to get back at him, so he asked her permission to be the only one who could call him by his chosen nickname. After agreeing, she asked him why he wanted that. So he reminded her that she was the hottest chick in school, meaning she would get huge aura points for being the only guy to give her that nickname. Just then, 3 fanboys came to beg Alia for a dance. As she started to fight them off, Q grabbed her hand and pulled her into the field so they could dance together. After a walk down memory lane, Masha insisted that they were lovers and said that their love story sounded like something out of a Disney movie. But Alia insists that they are just friends. Masha then says that Q is just like Sakun, whom she once loved and is still very picky about. The next day, Q shows up at the council office and tells Kaki that Yuki sent her to help with something. Just then, Masha arrives and introduces herself and asks her to help her with the shopping, because Yuki had to do it. After happily saying yes, Q introduces himself, but she is suddenly shocked when she hears his full name and holds his hands for a few seconds and suddenly tells him to follow her in Russian. When she pretends not to understand, he repeats it in English and forces her to endure the rest of the day's painful shopping at the council office. After buying some delicious clothes, he takes her to a tea shop and asks her opinion, but she says she has little experience with such things. Unlike Yuki, she remembers the day her parents separated and how she wanted to break up with her father until Yuki decided she wanted to stay with her mother. Just then, Masha hugs him and asks if he's okay before nearly burning his back with hot tea. They then both return to the boardroom where Kaki is waiting to see the plush. After a long, disappointed look, she thanks Q's for making sure Masha doesn't waste more money on useless junk. Suddenly, she asks Q to join the board, saying they could really use his help, but the QS turn her down. Masha then offers to make her an unofficial member, as she hates the position so much, but this makes them wonder why they're all so busy giving her a seat on the board. Kaki then brings up her past experience as vice president as the main reason, but Hughes insists that she didn't even deserve it then and doesn't now. Hearing this, Kaki tells him that she only chose to be the board president because it was the only way she could afford to lose her V card to her current boyfriend, the vice president. Hughes is shocked to hear this. So Kaki pulls out an old picture of her from the Gunner's last drink and tells Q that she went from being a worthless background character with low grades to a hot student icon because she fell in love with Chisaki. She then explains that Masha only joined the council because Chisaki asked her to. And after admitting this, Masha says that as long as they're doing their jobs on the council, the reason for joining doesn't matter. Kaki then mentions how efficient she and Yuki are during the day, which makes him start thinking about it. Kaki senses this and says that she might just join to help Soam. Eon become president, so Q promises to think about it. Just then he notices that Alia isn't around and asks why. So Kaki explains that she went to settle a dispute between the football and baseball teams. The baseball team has a big game where scouts will be coming to check out new talent. They plan to use the field, but the football team just made the zones, and they intend to use the field for practices and upcoming games. Normally, Chisaki would be the one to handle all the discussions between the two teams, but since she is busy with other things, they send Alia. After Kaki says that it might be a bit difficult for her to manage both teams alone, Q decides to help in case the argument turns into a fight. By then, both teams have already started arguing about which game is more important, so Alia thinks for a while before telling them to rest. When asked for a solution, she tells the football team to use the Riverside field instead, but they refuse and tell the baseball team to use it. As the argument continues, the captains and managers of both teams remain strangely silent, unless they are involved in the discussion. Meanwhile, Alia begins to panic as she realizes that her lifelong obsession with being alone has made it impossible for her to work with others. As tears begin to flow from his eyes, he begs in Russian for someone to help him. And as expected, Q's walks in as a knight in a school uniform and introduces himself as the latest council member in charge of general affairs. Moments earlier, he had been listening on the sidelines while Alicia tried to resolve the dispute, and after convincing herself that she could handle it, she decides to go until she hears him begging for help. When both teams decide to listen to him, he tells the baseball team to use the Riverside field because they have a smaller team, and also tells the football team to help set up practice. Again, the boys start arguing about it, And when Alicia is worried, Hughes turns his attention to the football team's general manager, who suddenly agrees to help the baseball team set up at Riverside Field. Hearing this, the poor virgins on the baseball team decide to accept Q's terms because they will finally get a chance to show off to the hotties. After telling them to report to the board, Q returns to the office with Aya, who is curious about how he was able to resolve the dispute in minutes. Once in the office, he apologizes for making her look bad, but she tells him not to worry about it and asks how he agreed to her proposals. He then tells her that the general manager of the football team is currently meeting with the captain of the baseball team, which is why he refused to say anything during the heated argument. This is also why he turned a blind eye to her after she proposed, because he knew she would accept the offer to avoid further arguments. When Kaki suddenly appears and asks if everything is okay, Alia gives Q all the credit. And after Kaki admits that she sent him there on purpose, Q decides to take the board seat. He and Aya go home together, but somewhere along the way, Alia complains about how Kenzaki finally got what he wanted when Alia asks if he plans to support Yuki as the next president. Hughes asks if this will affect his decision to run for president, but Alia assures him that he will get it with or without her help to increase his chances of crushing her. Hughes suddenly offers to support him instead and extends his hand so that he can accept the offer. Tears welling up, Alia happily accepts and says something in Russian that gives Q a sense of déjà vu. After a few minutes, he notices that she is a little too tight, and when he asks if she is still thinking about Yuki, she tries to explain only to get a nasty punch that resets her brain. After helping him back up, Alia acts like nothing happened. And he decides to accept that she might be a little mental too, so they continue to mess with each other until they reach his building. When he finally asks if his face is okay, he says that it has been numb since the slap. So he kisses her cheek and runs away while she freezes in shock and wonders what he said to her earlier in the park. O vaxta keter menzelin yenis daxil olen alia, parkta ona ashik oldugunu eteraf etdi usunanu tamamal itirir. Dikatini shurin in sedri almaga semlamesi lazim olduguna urzanu enandaran bur nis dekiktin sanrao, ni vaxt sabunu bils nied bilesti al merklanir. Alebu vaxt masha nerhet gurunarek isri daxil aller. Onagur de alia yakshi alabalmadijini sorusher, lakino, esel problem hakinda danishmamak usun pelush poltarini sixarir. De hasanrao, alia gurush isherlarinden danishir vi onane ashik oldugunu basha dushmek usun idea. Alia yeniden bunu inkar etamai bashlayanda masha ona tez hirkit etmai vi yoanu bashkasina itermek, riskini olmagi daer. Tex minanini vax de Hughes, ona el vermekten uten maga bashlayer vi inis amanda onan ona olan sevjasini eteraf et diini ba. Shadushur lakin o, bunu yalnas evler bash vern her shagur et diini kebel etmek kararina gelir. Valadinlerin in bashan madden evil yeshadeclari toxic munazabedel rizater ledigi kesmaish bur partlayishten sanra o, hes vaxt sevelmekten vaz kesamai kerar verir. Bur nis dekik sanra o, eve kadir vi sujetin bur eifel alir. O menim. Ona gerdale katini koromak usun durhul getamai salashir. Lakin yuki anu jerry saxlayer. Belelical, onler baglarini nerv beti sevia apparaler. Her bur ali vetendash kimi. Kudaha gunakar davernishlarden kasmaga salashir v, ona hes almasa tortlarinin ustunuert missini daer. Emma desmol taxdictin sanra de hamamdaki levaboya, surek near v jenklerin zervk almasi usun shu gerster my salashir. Shukwaler olson kai. Hughes lay katini koryub saxlayer kai. Onan si bur surf nezer salmajan hemish anan atajinda anan usun gerster di heasis bop, davernishin dindaha yakshial kajini suralier. Bur nis dekiktin sanrao. Aliarin shura sedali and namais liini desteklemek kararini, ona danishir vi yuki anan bunu ona zayanet etmek, usun etdiine emin olduktin sanra durhul hedindin arctic rixia vermi bashlayer. Sanra soroshur kai. Ali yenindaha buryu kavanlari varvi ona basisinin heelsign, asanlik ladaxil almek daha yakshadir. Sunki anan kishiade yeklarini nader halarda yerin yetern bur kizjan bostanini tutmek daha yakshadir. Siz citizen is. Gerslanildi kimi. Q anan sujital real hes bura lakesi yokstur kimi davernir. Baksmerek kai, anan balaka kani bunaneksini daer, ona gur de yuki ona zaterladir kai, o evvelki mektabulrind onlarind dadini arctic alib. Anan Alabama istiklerini kebel etmesi usunanu sads kesladijini basha dushan q, kapagi dander magi emer edir. Ona gur de ona zayanetnin sezasi olarak sasini dermasini daer. Buraz sanra izo, Aliani desteklemek kararan in onlarin basikardesh munazabetelri al hes bura lakesi almadijini is a edir. Belelical, o, surushmesenaikes vermek kararina gelir v bunana hemietin in almadijini, sunki yin deserve I sixikajini sorildi. O hemsenin ona deir kai, edralih nivax yorolsa, her zaman anan yanan akaid a biler. Amabu zaman anan irenkliandin yoroler v buraz yatmak usun eralir. O nehiat ertali an laik birani taptigi usun erzanu zoshbekst his ederkin. Ertasi gun seher qs yukanin kerpasinden sudagor lamaga salish mamasi al buraz tikubulnir. Enkek dushunamai vaxt irdiktin sonra o, nehiat yeniden normal basai ola bileskini kimtuln dermai kara verier. Lakin o, sarpidin kalksin kimi anan iagindin tutor v, ona normal hayat yashamagi anat masini deir. Siljan basasi uzarin slanky sestiktin sonra. Nervbeti ando sarpayan in altan de kaldajini anlier v kermek istier. Lakin kubunu kisas olmak usun mukamol fuset kimi kebel edir v sarpi il ona hukam edir. Ali idurs ilashenden sonra kunin gesik di usun tez sebersislanir. Lakin o, nehiat jalendo, hes vesin dale mish kimi davranir. Lakin o, hemashki kimi bunu setenlikal his edir v yerin acherer. Daha sonra hikaru vitai anu karyakid ilanamai devet ederler. Vo onlar labu bear danisharken, ali I kessel mish sin zetten gur hisselrini idirir v hollandia burljularind, bur as de hayakanlanir. Kariadiastic larini nezeret saxlamagi bakardikten, sonra durs bashlier v anan butun sesia and oyak kalmasi anu tikubundirir. Bu, anan indayanu kazanmak usun daha sox salish dijini dushun mesen, sebeb aller. Sox sonra hamasi volleyball oyanuna jederler. Alia lurl meshkini tez burs amanda sinektin kesserste, q nims top while yixalir. Oyan bitdiktin sonranu yaxlamak usun guranuer. Ona deir kai, buzerises zerb oldugu usun nerhet alma. Mo, israr edir vikizder masanin alabalmadijini yaxlamak usun yaxin lashir. Bunan anan indis aldigi sarsinti isla lakesi var. O ona buketer yaxin almektin esabil shamai bashlasada. O, nehiat anan kavan larina yakshi baxir viyukanin ne onler terrifindin buketer teluk altendol dugunu basha dushwer. Buna baxmerik, o soykan lilagini koramagi bakarir. Lakino, sas larini arxia beglamaga bashlianda, o deha de vesveselnir vias kala daxili sinlarin teslim aller. O nehiat, anu yaxlamagi deanderdict in sonra bur as su almek usun fever I jed. Emma alien in suyu ashagi salmaga bashlamasi kularin bashka yur dalmasin a sebeb aller. Ona gur de serenlemek usun bashana suturkwar. Nervbeti andamasha gurunur vikunin, suyabatiril dejini gur and nerhet aller. Ona gur de anu quarutmet in evil anan yakshi alabal medijini sorosher. Burden o, Alabama sevgi hekyasini yenide in a lovelander maga salashir kai, aliyini asakashkar kiskindersin. Alia kunai jerry suruklerek rixia verdict in sonra. Masha ona sagal deir videsmal usun ona teshakur edir. Bernice sani I sonra q hemish oldugu kimi alien in anan uzun partlamasini gerzlier, lakino bashan in yakshi alabal medijini sorosher, buda anu adietzes edir. De hasanra ona nerhet almamsini deir, lakino burden anan uzunu tutmaga salashir. Belelical, o arxia sureknir vidunenki erpushu dushanuer ne bird. En buyer ona buketer yakshi davrandajini sorosher. After she claims it's just because he has been acting weird all day, he explains that he just didn't have breakfast and slept really well the previous night, causing her to realize that she has been stressed out for no reason. She gets pissed at herself for thinking he had fallen for her and storms out while he remains clueless and thinks she is just back to her regular self. Hours later, he finishes with classes. So he reminds her that they have a council meeting, but she gives him the silent treatment and starts heading to the office. On getting there, they see a bunch of guys from both the baseball and soccer teams running out and walking in to find Chasaki holding a kendo stick while looking like she is out for blood. Hughes immediately tries to leave to keep himself alive, but she immediately apologizes and says she thought he was from the baseball team after she further explains how the kendo stick was her way of making the boys pay for stressing Alia. Hughes tells her to consider using her words next time. Minutes after this, Masha shows up and finds Chisaki and Kaki messing around with each other. As Hughes and Aliyah start whispering about their cute little display of affection, Masha asks when they got so close to each other. As usual, Aliyah acts like she barely knows him, and just as Hughes decides to go along with Masha's teasing, Yuki shows up. So they decide to get the meeting started with Hughes introducing himself, after he also tells them his goal to help Aliyah become council president. Kaki tells him to follow the lead of seniors like him and Chisaki so he can easily adapt to life as an official member of the council. Just then, Yuki tells them that she has to visit the art club to discuss their budget and asks Aliyah to follow her. But as they both head out, Q's gets worried about what Yuki might have in store for his precious Aliyah. Moments later, Aliyah suddenly takes Yuki into an empty classroom to talk about her partnership with Q's since she already expects some sort of hostility. But Yuki claims to be perfectly okay with it and reminds Aliyah that Q is perfectly capable of making decisions for himself. However, she does admit to feeling a little disappointed about his decision not to side with her despite knowing how she loves him. Hearing this shocks Aliyah to the core since she still doesn't know that they are actually siblings. And when Yuki asks if she has feelings for him, she panics and claims they are just friends. All of a sudden, Yuki pins her to the wall in order to force a confession out of her. But Aliyah refuses to budge and assures Yuki that she has no intention of stealing her man. After deciding to accept her claims, Yuki suggests that they start calling each other by their first name before they head to the art club. By then, Q's and Masha, who have been looking through a bunch of reports, finally find an issue with one of them. While Q's realizes that Masha is even more hardworking than Aliyah. Chisaki turns Kaki into her personal busboy as she struggles with even the most basic tasks. He eventually tells her to head to the library and tells Q's not to worry about her occasional laziness because she is still the top student on the council. Moments later, Masha offers to treat them all to some traditional Russian tea. And when Q asks if there's a specific kind only Russians drink, she explains that it actually depends on what a family prefers. After further explaining that they only got used to it because of how obsessed their mom was with black tea, she asks if he knows anything about their culture. He then says he only learned from watching movies and takes a sip of her tea before recalling how obsessed his mom also was with tea. Moments later, Yuki and Aliyah finally return. So Masha serves them both some tea as well. But then Aliyah decides to sit awfully close to Q's. Despite the contact, he asks for some personal space, but she refuses and claims it's bad luck for a lady to sit at the edge of the table. Q's then spots the suspicious smile on Yuki's face and realizes that she must have said something to make Aliyah act so unnaturally. Just then, Masha uses Russian to say that the couple who sit at the table's edge never get married, and Aliyah quickly responds that it's way too early for such a conversation in Russian as well. Much later, Q's decides to walk Aliyah home again and suggests going to a restaurant. So, she asks if it's a date in Russian, but he pretends like he can't understand her again. Once inside, Aliyah orders the mukbang special. And when Q finally asks about what happened with Yuki, she tells him not to worry about it. He then realizes that she won't admit it and simply tells her not to take it seriously because Yuki was definitely just trying to get a reaction out of her. With that out of the way, they decide to talk about the council elections, and Q's starts by telling her that going up against Yuki won't be an easy challenge. When she first ran for president years ago, there were 6 other students ready to fight for the position. So the school organized a student congress so all competitors could debate in front of the entire student body and see who was more favored by their peers. After the debate, half of the contestants dropped out because they accepted that Yuki could not be defeated. As he continues explaining how difficult the election might be, Aliyah gets pissed that he hasn't tried to make a move on her and starts chewing her straw until it breaks. She then attacks her parfait like a starving refugee, but he barely notices. So she decides to catch him off guard by offering him a taste from her spoon. With no escape plan in mind, Q's bends to her wishes and quickly realizes that they just shared their first indirect kiss. But then he notices another student named Sayaka from the window. After Aliyah pulls back his attention by asking for a winning strategy, he tells her about Kaki's glow-up and how it helped him gain the trust of the entire student body before explaining that she needs something with a similar effect to win everybody's heart over. Just then, he gets flustered by the thought of the indirect kiss and orders something for himself to avoid a redo. So Aliyah teases him for getting worked up over something so small. When he asks if Russian chicks usually exchange mouth juices with friends, she replies that she has only done it with him, but says it in Russian, thinking he can understand. As they continue talking about the election, Q's tells her to try giving a heartfelt speech during the term's closing ceremony so everyone can see how serious she is. She then asks for help drafting the perfect speech, but he tells her to just be authentic and assures her that it will be enough. Moments later, he offers her a taste of his food and suddenly remembers how much she hates spicy food. But it's already too late by then as she doesn't want to appear weak in front of him. to teach her a lesson about acting tough. He then decides to give her the spiciest portion, and after taking a bite, she switches back to her mother tongue to cuss him out. After they both continue walking home, and when she asks who Yuki plans to pair up with, Q's initially says they won't have to worry about it. But then he remembers Sayaka and admits that she would be a serious problem for them. Aliyah then asks who she is. So he explains that Sika was the runner-up who lost them years back, which means she likely still holds a grudge. The next day, Yuki introduces a new council member named Ayano, who will also handle general affairs. But while everyone else appears excited by the new face, Q is shocked to see her. After the meeting, Q takes a walk to clear his head, but Ayano suddenly shows up and tells him to follow her. As soon as they find a quiet place to talk, he tells her to get to the point. So she asks if he really plans to support Aliyah in the election. After he says yes, she tells him that his grandfather strongly disapproves of his decision and is pissed that he is going against Yuki after abandoning the family name. Hearing this causes Q's to get irritated since he has long borne a deep resentment towards his grandfather. But then Ayano also expresses her disappointment, as she never expected him to go against his own sister. After he assures her that he has nothing against Yuki or her goals, she asks why he is supporting Aliyah instead of her, and he tells her about the promise he made to help Aliyah become president. Ayano still insists that going against Yuki is a direct contradiction of his claim to always love and support her. But Q gets tired of the unwanted sermon and tells her that he will always love Yuki, even if they end up as rivals. Ayano then decides to accept his words and leaves with a concerned look on her face. Afterwards, Q's returns to class where T-Chai greets him with a top-of-the-line otaku magazine and asks him to pick a type from all the caked-up hotties. When he finally picks one, Tishi notes that she looks a lot like Aliyah, but Q's claims they look nothing alike and says Aliyah likely already has a boyfriend. The next moment, Aliyah shows up and hits him with a piercing stare of disappointment before cussing him out in Russian and telling him to keep his shameless vices at home. Q's then explains that it is actually Tishi's magazine, but she ignores him and goes to her seat. So, Tishi continues the conversation by asking Q's if he wants a girlfriend as Aliyah perks up her ears to hear his response. He claims he hasn't even thought about it before telling Tishi that he would only date someone he can treat like a bestie. Just then, Aliyah uses Russian to remind him that she is the perfect fit, but he pretends to understand while secretly blushing when he also states that his girl must have a beautiful smile. Takes and Hikari take turns explaining how nonchalant chicks are the worst. No. T realizing that they have been unintentionally throwing shade at poor Aliyah this entire time. Hughes eventually notices and tells them to say things to make her feel better. But then T-Chai foolishly declares that Aliyah would be the best chick for him. As expected, this causes Aliyah to get pissed because his compliment implies that she has no personality. Around the same time, Iono meets up with Yuki to tell her that she still deeply admires Yuki, although he has no regard for their grandfather. Hearing all this causes Yuki to get a little concerned, so she asks Ayano if she has feelings for Q's. Ayano then claims that she only admires him and would never think of dating him, even if her kitty could use some of his rebel magnum. She also tells Yuki what he said about loving her no matter what. So Yuki takes a moment to get her snail under control because it started dripping at the thought of those words coming out of his mouth. After cooling off, she asks for a status update on their run for presidency. So Ayano tells her not to worry about anything because barely anyone knows who Aliyah is. While she remains a campus favorite, Yuki immediately gets excited to see what Q's comes up with to defeat her, and says she has always wanted to go up against the Suo family's #1 prodigy. Much later, the girls meet up to play card games, and Yuki uses the opportunity to show off by stealing the first win, which causes Aliyah to get pissed. After paying close attention to the game, Chisaki notes that Aliyah is way too easy to read, and Kaki agrees that despite her nonchalant attitude, she is actually a hot mess. While Masha is the one with a cool head on her shoulders, just then Ayano starts serving drinks. And when Kaki asks why she is acting like a maid, she explains how her family served the Siwis for generations and says she took over from her grandparents because she loves being the side character that no one ever pays attention to. She then tries to give more details about her obsession with Q's. But after recalling that he is keeping his family ties secret, she decides to keep it to herself, causing Q's to realize that she still holds him in high regard. When Kaki notices her silent footsteps and asks about them, she explains that her grandmother helped her master the art of being unnoticed. The next moment, Masha shows up and asks for some tea as well. So Ano apologizes for not paying attention to her. Masha then tells her not to worry because Alia had specifically told her not to come. Just then, Kaki notices the tense energy between Alia and Yuki, so he admits to feel a little worried. But Q's and Masha both tell him that she is having a lot of fun despite how she looks. When the drinks finally run out, Ayano decides to get more, but Masha tells her not to bother and volunteers to go get it with Q's instead. After getting all their orders, they both head out, and Masha decides to thank him for his help with Aliyah recently, because she was never able to rely on anyone for help before he came along. At the vending machine moments later, Hughes asks why she always acts so simple when Aliyah is around. So, Masha explains that she doesn't want Aliyah to feel the need to compete with her. She goes on to tell him about how competitive Aliyah has been over the years, and said she had to be the laid-back sister, so Alia could fully accept herself. While getting drinks, Hughes thinks about his relationship with Yuki and realizes that it's weirdly similar to what she is experiencing with Masha is experiencing with Alia, except for the fact that Yuki always wants to smash in the morning. He then commends Masha on being such a caring sister, and she responds by rubbing his head and praising him for being a good brother as well. Around the same time, Aliyah runs into Sika, who then asks for a moment of her time to talk. Naturally, Aliyah gets curious and follows her, only to regret it when Sayaka accuses her of doing something shady to get Q's as her partner for the election. As the entire school gathers to watch them argue about it, Hughes hears all the noise and rushes to defend Aliyah. After she explains Sayaka's accusations, he tells her that he chose to help Aliyah on his own and demands an apology. But Sayaka responds by challenging him to a student congress. Upon hearing this, all the students get excited, but Aliyah steps in to challenge Sayaka instead, so she accepts and promises to take them both down. Much later, Kaki takes a look at the topic Sika chose for the debate and gets a little worried about how Q's and Aliyah will fare against her. However, Q's claims he already expected it since she has been gunning for him from the start, after Alia also says that they have to make her pay for the embarrassment she caused the other day. Hughes notes that it is the perfect opportunity to finally introduce themselves to the student body instead of waiting until the closing ceremony like they initially planned. Afterwards, they both return to class where Q gives Alia a comprehensive essay on what Sika is most likely going to use against them. He then asks her for counters, and they end up spending the rest of the day coming out with counter-arguments to rival Sayaka. Eventually, Hughes decides that they have enough to win the debate. But then Aliyah gets curious and asks why she seems to hate him so much. Hughes then admits that he was initially surprised by her hostility because he thought they both shared a mutual respect for each other's talents despite being rivals for years. After giving it some thought, he tells Aliyah that everything likely started because of his decision to go against Yuki for the first time. While he stares off into the clouds, Aliyah starts blaming herself for everything. But when he eventually notices and asks if she is okay, she tells him not to worry about it and acts like she is perfectly fine. The next morning they get a surprise visit from a blonde baddie named Miam, who calmly introduces herself as Sika's partner before wishing them both luck. Aliyah gets a little surprised since she has never seen Miam before. So, Hughes explains that she has been Sayaka's closest friend for years and also has a lot of influence due to her baddie status. Minutes later, they enter the hall, and after seeing most of the student body already on their seats, eager for the debate, Aliyah starts losing confidence. Just then, Hughes asks if her melons are actually E-cups, which surprises her. So she hides them and reminds him that they are in public. After saying that it's the perfect time to ask since she can't attack him, he explains that it was just his way of getting her through the nervousness and assures her that everything will be fine. He further advises her to just focus on being authentic like they discussed before. Instead of trying to be perfect as soon as he finishes with the pep talk, Kaki takes the podium to address the students and introduce the contestants as well as the debate topic Sayaka proposed. Sayaka then takes the stand and introduces herself before reminding everyone that the Student Council previously chose its members by assessing the students' contributions to the Academy's growth, which is far from what is happening now, as they seem to be enlisting any washed-up loser they like. She then suggests that the council revert to its former standard and choose new members after careful consultations with teachers. After she returns to her seat, Alia takes the stand and immediately hears the wave of gossip erupting from the audience as the students question why a newbie is already trying to run the show. Despite this, Alia calmly introduces herself and counters Sika's argument by reminding everyone that the entire purpose of the student council is to give regular students a chance to empower each other. Seeking guidance from a teacher for a decision regarding the council would simply mean returning that power to the man and admitting that they are all too stupid to actually run the council on their own. This causes everyone to realize that there is actually more to Aliyah than her gorgeous blue eyes, so they stop the back talk. Upon seeing this, Sayaka furthers her motion by asking why the council has been casually accepting all the recent volunteers. And Aliyah responds by reminding her that things have been running even better since the council took that step. Sayaka then insists that teachers have to be involved to control some aspect of the decision-making, as the president is no longer up to it. But Aliyah tells her that Kaki would have communicated a need for help if he needed any. She also states that it is his choice to involve a teacher if he feels the need to. But then Sayaka tells everyone to consider what might happen if Kaki starts abusing his power. This immediately sends a wave of concern through the crowd, and as the gossip and endless questions erupt, Aliyah starts to panic again. This time, Hughes quickly swoops in to save her, and after she returns to her seat, he jokes about her voice getting weak to lighten the mood. He then tells everyone to remember that Kaki was once a plus-sized nerd who couldn't hold a conversation without begging for his mommy. However, with a little determination and an unhealthy addiction to Chisaki's cakes, he pushed himself to become the president they all know and love. After he tells them that the debate is pointless, they all start agreeing with him. So, Sayaka runs backstage to shed tears of defeat, and Aliyah immediately chases after her. Mimi then officially takes the L, so Kaki ends the argument and names Aliyah and Q's as the winners. By then, Sayaka had just thought back to how Q's and Yuki were the perfect duo before Little Miss Supermodel swooped in. When Alia finally catches up to her, she breaks down. So Alia offers her a shoulder to cry on until Mi shows up to take over. Meanwhile, Yuki tells Ayano that Q's actually went easy on Sika and could have caused her to spiral into depression if he had gone all out. She then claims it doesn't matter since she is still going to defeat him, but Ayano tells her to chill on the boasting since she might just jinx herself. Later on, Aliyah meets up with Q's and promises to prove that she deserves to become the next president before asking for the real reason he chose to side with he, because it definitely wasn't just to get her cakes. Q's then admits that he has always been in Yuki's shadow, and this is finally his chance to make a name for himself by taking her down. He also asks why she accepted him as her partner, but she responds in Russian with a smile before asking him to walk her home like always. Hours later, Yuki joins her mom and grandfather for dinner. After hearing about the debate, he tells Yuki to make sure she wins, even though Q's actually has more talent than her. After eating, she heads back to her room with Ayano, but then her mom stops her to ask about her relationship with Q's. Moments later, Yuki asks Ayano for permission to hug her so she can relieve her stress. After the hug, Yuki realizes that it's going to take a little more than that and suddenly waterboards Ayano's melons before saying that she has realized why guys love milkers so much. The next day in class, a bunch of guys show up to commend Q's on winning the debate while Aliyah sinks into her chair like an unwanted stage ahead. Hughes eventually notices this, so he kicks Hikaru and gives him a sign to talk to her. Hikaru then asks if she rehearsed all those things she said on stage, and when she says no, he starts glazing her and acts like she was the reason they won the debate. Soon enough, the other boys also started praising her. But then they also mocked Sayaka for running off in tears when she was the one who challenged them in the first place. As they continue roasting her, Aliyah suddenly gets up and asks Q to come with he in the council office. Moments later, Q asks if she felt bad hearing everyone talk badly about Sayaka, and after she says yes, he tells her that there is no point in getting worked up since they won the debate fair and square. Despite this, Alia remains upset and says she doesn't like the way Sayaka is being treated. So Q's takes a moment to think before promising to fix it. She gets surprised by this and thanks him for always helping out. And after telling her not to worry about it, he hears a sound from the table nearby and realizes that Kaki and Chisaki were indulging in unholy activities before they walked in. He then decides to act like he hasn't noticed them. But Aliyah starts inching closer to his face, which causes him to realize that she wants to turn the office into a breeding room. Instead of taking the opportunity to finally get the sloppy kiss he has always wanted, he tells Kaki and Chisaki to stop hiding. Gel at him, so they crawl out of the table and claim they were looking for something. After they all agree to tell no one about what happened, Alia gets embarrassed and runs off. Q's then decides to go see Mimi, But on getting to her class, he sees her surrounded by the usual slow-brain baddies and decides to wait by the door instead of risking his brain cells by talking to them. Eventually, Mimi sees him and asks what he wants. So he asks for a moment of her time in an empty classroom. Moments later, she says she would have accepted his proposal if he had wanted to ask her out, but she already knew that he wanted something else. He gets surprised by this and asks why. So she explains that she is actually okay with clapping anyone as long as they keep her entertained for long enough. For the first time, Hughes realizes that there are freaks worse than his sister and tells Miam to only go out with a guy she likes, and she replies that he sounds exactly like Sayaka. He then says she is the reason he wanted to talk because they need to figure out a way to stop people from hating on her for losing the debate. To achieve this, he suggests coming up with a rumor to make everyone believe that the loss wasn't actually Sika's fault. But then Miam asks if he really wants that because it means that their victory will be questioned by everybody. After he says it doesn't matter, she agrees to help him and heads out while he stays back to figure out why he feels like someone has been watching him. When he suddenly calls Ayano's name, she jumps out of the table and almost gives him a heart attack before Yuki also stands up and says they followed him to figure out why he was talking to the enemy. Just then, Aliyah shows up and immediately thinks he is trying to run a three-way with them. So she complains about being left out in Russian before storming off. While he thinks of a way to defend his honor, Miam thinks back to the day Sayaka saw her smooching with a random geek in class. After their make-out session, Sika stopped her to demand answers because she had just left her previous boyfriend at the time. When she said the new guy wasn't anything special, Sayaka reset her brain with a brutal slap and told her to stop acting like the chicks that work in the red light district. In class, moments later, her friend asks if he wanted to confess his love. So she explains that he was just asking about Sayaka. When they start blaming Sayaka for the debate, she claims that Sika actually left because she was pissed. They all get intrigued by this, so she cooks up a story about how Sika learned that she planted fake supporters in the crowd during the debate. While the rumor slowly spreads to other classes, Q continues explaining what happened to Alia, but she refuses to believe him, so he asks if she wants to study with him at the office to change the mood. Naturally, she agrees to it since she never expected such a request. At the office minutes later, she gets shy because of how close they are to each other and prays that no one else shows up. But of course, Yuki shows up to crash the party after she joins them. Aliyah notices that Q's has been reading complex solutions and asks why he won't solve them like everyone else. So, Yuki tells her not to bother trying to fix him because he has always studied like that. Moments later, he sees that Ayano is struggling with a problem and offers to help, but she only accepts on the condition that he has to degrade her like a worthless slave. His casual reaction to this statement causes Aliyah to get concerned, so she asks if they are really just friends, because they seem a lot closer than that. After Q's assures her that there is nothing else between them. Masha shows up and gets curious about a hypnosis book Chisaki seized from a student earlier. She tries to test it with Alia, but she refuses, so she tries her luck with Chi instead. Yuki then gets a devilish idea and supports Masha's decision to try it out, so Q's agrees to test it on Masha first. Surprisingly, it works on her. And after he uses it on Alia as well, Yuki suggests making them admit their deepest, darkest secrets. What starts as a joke quickly takes a nasty turn as both sisters start stripping in front of everyone. They all frantically try to stop the hypnosis. But after minutes of failing, Shiizaki returns and uses a powerful jutsu skill to release their minds while they both start screaming. She prepares her fists to damage Q's face. Later that night, Q's gets tired of studying and considers rubbing one out to get his energy back up. But after several minutes of contemplating, he decides to continue reading so Aliyah won't be disappointed in him. Minutes later, she calls to check on him and asks about his progress with the books. So, he admits to feeling tired, but says he is still going strong. She then asks about his goals for the year's exams and makes him promise to do his best. As they continue talking about random stuff, the age topic comes up when Aliyah tries to figure out who deserves the most respect between them. She gets shocked when Q says that he can still remember her birthday from when she announced it on her first day in class. He then mentions his and tells her not to bother thinking about it too much since it already passed. After ending the call, he gets excited, thinking she only called to check on him, when in reality, she had watched a horror movie earlier on and was too scared to sleep. However, with her fears a little less intense, she starts feeling bad about not knowing when his birthday passed. After a week of grueling exams, Aliyah meets up with him to walk home together as usual. But along the way, Hughes recalls that she hasn't said anything in Russian throughout the entire week and asks if she is okay. She gets flattered by the concern and says it's nothing, but he continues asking and reminds her that they are meant to be partners. She then admits to feeling upset that he didn't invite her to his birthday party, but he explains that there was never a party to begin with. She gets shocked by this, so he asks if birthday parties are a big deal in Russia. And after she says yes, he tells her that he can't even remember the last time he got cake to celebrate his birthday. After further explaining that not inviting a friend to a birthday party in Russia means cutting ties with them, Aliyah chooses to stay upset with him for no reason, so he suggests celebrating it by going out tomorrow. The next day, he puts on his best outfit, hoping to steal her heart with his looks. But she shows up looking like a goddess in human form and immediately becomes the center of attention as the locals stare and wonder why such a hottie is walking with a wannabe model. When he asks if it bothers her, she claims to already be used to it and says she always uses her language to scare off guys trying to hit on her. In a bid to make her feel a little more comfortable, he decides to pose as her boyfriend, which causes her to blush and admit that it's her first date in Naturally. Hughes G. T.S. shocked to hear that she hasn't been on a date before, but he keeps up the cool guy act and excitedly takes her to his favorite steakhouse. Unfortunately, his surprise gets ruined by the fact that she used to eat steak there several years ago with her family. Despite this, Q still takes her inside and uses the opportunity to explain what the election will look like. Usually, the student body will simply react to whichever candidate they prefer, which means that getting a silent crowd is probably enough to seal their fates. After saying that they have little chance of surpassing Yuki in popularity right now, Hughes explains his new strategy to essentially close the gap between them so they can focus all their energy on preparing a perfect speech that counters everything Yuki might say. He then considers playing mind games on her, but decides not to since it's not something Yuki would do to them. After saying that it's something Miyam is capable of, Hughes tells Aliyah that she came up with the recent rumor of cheating all on her own. So Aliyah thanks him for helping Sika like she asked him to. When he suddenly starts blushing, Aliyah calls him cute, which surprises him since it's something she would usually say in Russian. She then leans in to give him a bite of her steak, and he calmly takes it, thinking it will catch her off guard as well, but she responds by eating from the same fork. After also giving him a couple's mug as his birthday gift, she notices how much he has been blushing and tells him that the second half is at home to trigger a stronger reaction. At this point, Hughes decides to accept that there is literally nothing he can do to escape her charms. The next day, they meet up in the council office to wait for the parent-teacher meeting, and Kaki takes the opportunity to tell them about the new changes to their uniform. After he and Chisaki drift off into their own world to celebrate their brilliant idea, Masha shows up to serve her signature tea. But then Hughes notices that she still feels weird because of the hypnosis incident, so he offers to help her clean up after they finish. While doing so, a couple of minutes later, he apologizes for what happened, but then she asks if he saw her goods when it all went down. After he admits to it, she punishes him by pulling his cheek, and he slowly starts to realize why she always has simps chasing after her. But then her mom calls he offers to take care of the rest. Moments later, he returns with the cups and meets Yuki, who then jokes about finally being alone with him. He then tries to ignore her, but she pounces and starts begging for attention until he decides to fulfill her wishes. Thankfully, his paternal grandfather calls for the meeting, so he escapes Yuki to see him and gets shocked to find the old geyser dressed like a Russian James Bond. After joking about it, they both decide to wait for the meeting to start. But then, Alia comes out and the old geyser completely loses his senses as he always loved European chicks. While Q tries to hold him down, Alia's mom, Acme, shows up and gets excited to see the boy her daughter keeps yapping about back home. Q gets distracted by Ame's perfect face, but then his grandfather finally gets a hold of Aliyah and begs her to marry Q's. As Q tries to stop him again, Acme also asks Aliyah to accept the offer. Much later, they finally finish with the meeting. But just as Q's grandfather starts asking about Aliyah, he sees his mom, Yumi, and freezes in shock. Later that night, Q's relives the good times he spent with Yumi. At first, she seemed to love his progress, so he decided to keep her happy by becoming even better. But this took a dark turn when he put on an amazing performance during a school event and realized that she hated being there in an effort to bring her smile back. He worked himself to the bone and kept honing his skills until the day she flipped out and told him to stop. After finally waking up, Hughes realizes that he is coming down with a fever and decides to skip school for the day. Hours later, he hears someone at the door and sees Alia, who then explains that Yuki sent her to look after him because she had something else to do. After thanking her for showing up with his medicine, Hughes tells her not to worry about staying with him, but she insists and says he shouldn't even be alone in the first place. Upon realizing that she won't take no for an answer, Hughes decides to let her in, and they both immediately enter his room. However, instead of giving her back shots, Q sits on his bed while she takes a look around and asks why it smells like a locker root. She then decides to make him some porridge. Once in the kitchen, she smiles when she spots the mug she gave him as a birthday gift. Much later, she returns to serve him the porridge and after taking a long look at her outfit. He thanks her for giving him something to go on to at night. As he starts eating the porridge, she asks about his parent, so he tells her that his dad spends most of his time at work while his mom is not in his life anymore. After eating, Hughes decides to take a nap and tells Alia that she can leave whenever she wants, but she refuses and says she will be studying in the living room. He then falls asleep, thinking she will leave eventually, but after waking up sometime in the night, he finds her still in the living room. But this time, Yano is there as well. Upon seeing him, Yano rushes over and tells him to use her body as a crutch while pressing her melons into his chest. Alia then asks why she is even here. So Yano reminds her that her life's purpose is to serve as a maid and give Q's anything he wants, including her plots. After Alia reminds he that she is actually Yuki's maid and not his, she claims that Yuki sent her and tells Alia to head home since she is no longer needed. She also reminds Alia that she has a big day tomorrow. And when Q's asks for details, Alia tells him not to worry about it and decides to leave. Q then decides to go back to sleep. And when Ayano asks if he plans to take a bath, he tells her not to worry about it because he is too weak to do anything else. She then offers to clean him up in bed, but he orders her to return to Yuki. So she finally gives him space to enjoy the night. The following afternoon, he wakes up still feeling drowsy and asks for his meds. But when he hands them over, he notices something weird and asks for the packet. Ayano initially hesitates, but after he insists on seeing it, she brings it out and he realizes that she has been giving him sleeping tablets, so he asks if it was Alia or Yuki who put her up to it. When she refuses to respond, he decides to head to school, but then she stops him and says it's already too late. Despite this, he drags himself to school and overhears a bunch of guys talking about how Yuki ate Alia up, causing him to realize that Yuki had been plotting to make her move since he fell sick. Moments later, he enters the classroom and sees Alia, who then apologizes for wasting all the time and effort he put into preparing her. Yesterday, Yuki called her to talk about his fever. And after begging her to check on him, she also asked Alia to join her for the broadcast session scheduled for the next afternoon so they could discuss the Congress debate. When Alia refused and said she was tired of talking about that debate, Yuki realized that she really didn't want to capitalize on winning against Sika to improve her chance of becoming council president. Yuki then agreed not to talk about it, but still begged Alia to join her on the broadcast, so Alia agreed. The next moment, Yuki dropped the nice girl act and called Alia a naive sheep who had seriously underestimated the amount of work it took to win. She then told Alia that her greatest mistake would be treating their contest the way she did with Sayaka, and this caused Alia to realize that she had other plans with the broadcast. Yuki then admitted to it, but still claimed that Alia would be unable to present herself as a worthy president despite knowing what would happen. This caused Alia to realize that Yuki seriously underestimated him. So she promised to show up to the broadcast without getting any help from Q's, failing to realize that this was all part of Yuki's master plan. However, when they both got to the broadcast studio earlier on, Yuki suddenly started apologizing for the way she spoke yesterday, and this completely caught Alia off guard. She eventually accepted Yuki's apology. But then Yuki decided to also tell her why she wanted to be council president so badly. She told Alia about her long-lost brother, who was the family's source of pride until the day he cracked under pressure and left never to be seen again. Hearing all this made Alia question her own reasons for wanting to become council president. And at that moment, Yuki started the broadcast so she could barely give a proper response to any of the questions as her mind had been flipped over by the sudden trauma dump. As Alia tears up and continues apologizing, Q's tells her to relax and reminds her that the broadcast was scheduled in the afternoon on a day when most of the students would have already left, which means that Yuki is just trying to get into her head as part of her preparation for the main event. He then tells her not to worry about it and suddenly starts smiling like a hot psychopath while saying that he has never felt this excited. Upon seeing this, Aliyah senses some moisture down there and admits that she loves his current expression in Russian. She then becomes sad again and says that she doesn't have a solid reason for running like Yuki does. But then Q says that it doesn't matter because her personality and commitment are all she has ever needed. After he successfully lifts her spirits, Sayaka shows up with me to apologize for the way she lashed out the other day. She then thanks them for everything and decides to go admit to the entire school that she lost the debate with a broadcast. But Q says there is a better way to repay Aliyah's kindness if she really wants to. While Aliyah spends the rest of the evening working on her speech, Hughes pays close attention to every detail to make sure she gets everything right. But even after achieving perfection, Aliyah still gets worried and doubts herself. Cuz then tries to give her another pep talk, but she refuses to listen and reminds him that this is going to be a lot more difficult than the debate against Sayaka, which she actually flopped in case he already forgot. When he explains that she just has to speak from the heart like he taught her, she insists that it won't be that easy for him and asks how he finds it so easy to be friendly with everyone. He then says that it's no big deal, but she continues asking for the secret sauce. So he decides to give her some special tips to improve her social skills. She gets shocked by how easy it is to become an extrovert. But just as his lessons start to sink in, Yuki barges in with Ano. Hughes immediately tells Aliyah not to fall for her pretense, and when Yuki jokes about Aliyah being disappointed in her. Aliyah calmly asks if she actually wants to be friends even after the humiliation ritual she pulled earlier. After Yuki nods to signal that she still intends to stay friends, Aliyah says that she plans to tell the whole school exactly why she wants to be council president during their debate. Yuki then laughs at how direct she is about it before asking Q if he is upset with her. After admitting that he was actually surprised by the decision to play dirty, Q says she is actually conflicted because he can't decide between commending her and making her pay for thinking she could pull such a dirty trick on him. The next moment, Kaki and the others show up to discuss the order of events since the debate is happening tomorrow. When he asks who is going to be giving a speech first, Yuki suggests doing a coin toss to decide and tells Ano to flip it, but Q stops her and says it should be someone who isn't involved in the speeches. Masha then decides to flip it, and they all decide that Aliyah gets to pick who goes first if she guesses the correct side, while Yuki gets to pick if Aliyah fails. With that out of the way, Masha flips the coin, and after it lands, Aliyah picks heads. Unfortunately, she fails. So Yuki takes a moment to think carefully before deciding to give the first speech. The next day, the ceremony starts with a bunch of teachers giving speeches before Kaki, Chisaki, and Masha take turns addressing the students as well. Yuki then takes the stage and introduces herself before giving a speech about fairness and how all students should have the right to express their opinions. After pulling out a suggestion box, she explains how the current administration barely pays attention to it because of all their responsibilities and promises to be the one who changes the entire system to a point where everyone can voice out their opinions. She also reminds them that she was once a council president and assures them that her previous experience combined with everything she has learned in recent times makes her the best option for the next president. As soon as she leaves, Ano takes the stand and basically spends several minutes gazing at Yuki while everyone stares at her face and wonders why such a beauty has no social life. After she finally concludes the speech, Aliyah heads out to address everyone and starts by speaking Russian, which catches everyone off guard. Minutes later, she stops and apologizes for switching to default mode before using Japanese to restart the speech. Luckily, her risky gamble pays off as everyone starts laughing and decides to pay attention to her speech. She then admits that she barely has any experience and promises to do her best to meet their expectations. After her speech, the crowd erupts in applause since they never expected the quiet new girl to be so authentic. Hughes then takes over and starts by acting like a clown to make everyone laugh before addressing the rumors about him abandoning Yuki for Aliyah's cakes. He explains that he had dumped Yuki long before making his decision to support Aliyah and also says that Aliyah is the best option for council president because she has always been authentic and demonstrates the qualities a true president should have. The next moment he tells everyone that Sayaka and Miami will join them in the council if Aliyah wins. He then calls them both on stage and after Aliyah joins them to bow. The crowd erupts in applause. Much later, Sayaka tells them that she will not be campaigning with them anymore since she still thinks Q's should be working with Yuki. But Aliyah still decides to win her over no matter the cost. When Yuki shows up, Aliyah hits her with the same cold stare she used the other day, so Yuki accepts her. Defeat, Ano immediately apologizes for giving a useless speech, but Yuki tells her not to bother apologizing because their entire strategy was doomed from the start. After Q's checks his ranks on the scoreboard and gets disappointed over the fact that he failed to win his bet against her. As they both start heading out, he asks for her demands. And when she decides to take some time to think about it, he realizes that she never even expected to win. Moments later, they reach their lockers and Q suddenly tells Aliyah to start calling him by his first name. Despite feeling embarrassed, she accepts it. But then he also tells her that they need to start spending more time together to prepare for the election because Ano and Yuki will definitely be plotting a major comeback for the elections. Will Q's finally use this opportunity to get in the sheets with Aliyah, or will she keep begging for his magnum in Russian? Comment Russian baddie to find out. And don't forget to turn on post notifications after subscribing to make sure you never miss any of music.